Well, hello, 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 brothers and sisters. It is so good, so very good to be here with you today. And I'd like to welcome my new subscribers. This is Readings with Regina, where we will actually hear me read books to you. Because I have discovered I've been studying the brain for about 10 years or so, maybe 10 or 12 years, very seriously. And I know that being read to and reading enhances brain power. If you want to know more about that, look at some of my earlier episodes, especially the ones where I used the book Murder Incorporated by Mumia Abu Jamal and Stephen Victoria. In any event, I want to get right into the reading for today, and I'm going to be reading from a book that many of you who've been hanging with me know about. The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of Capitalism, or Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism. And let me tell you why this is important. This is the system under which we live. We should know exactly how it started. And the enslavement of the African had a lot to do with how it started. And the genocide of the Native American people has a lot to do with how America started. Now, when I read this book, this is what I want you to think about as you listen to me read. When I say the word land, I want you to think about the indigenous people that were here before the Europeans came: the Pequots, the Cherokee, Oglala, Cheyenne, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Apache, Pawnee, Blackfoot, Shoshone, Ute, the Navajo, and the Paiute. And it was many, many more, but I just wanted to zero in on a few. And when you hear me read the word enslaved or African American or African, I want you to think about the Zanj, the Twa, the Yoruba, the Watusi, the Fulani, the Hausa, the Iwe, the Ga, the Kabre, the Igbo, the Ife, Mbuche, the Maasai, the Gulaga, the Fang, and of course, it was many, many more than that. But I want you to just really be able to put people to land and see exactly what happened with those folks to give us the America that we are living uh, in today. Oh, let me see this comment here. Hey, Michael. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Absolutely. All right, let us get it going. Let me do this. Uh, yeah, I think I'll do that. No, I'll do this banner first. I like that one. Okay, here we go. Between the end of the American Revolution and the Fletcher versus Peck decision in 1810, that was just a decision about contracts, that a contract made between a purchaser of an enslaved person is a contract, and it holds together solidly. Contracts cannot be broken. Okay. Slavery's expansion linked the nation together. Now, check this. I'm going to read this again. Slavery's expansion linked the nation together. The needs of the nation encouraged the growth of a complex of institutions and patterns, and just as significantly, excuses that made national, political, and financial alliances possible. The needs of individual enslavers and others who hoped to profit from the expansion of all sorts of economic opportunities encouraged the growth of a more powerful set of national capabilities, more market friendly, like stock market friendly laws, and more unified markets. The needs of national expansion plus the ability of chained people. Now, who were the chained people? I told you who I wanted you to think about when I talked about the enslaved. All right, the chained people to walk trapped enslaved people as absolutely held property in the political compromises, political alliances, and financial schemes of the United States, and in the very map of the young country. Slavery, and specifically the right of enslavers to sell and to move their slaves into new territory, because a national practice as a strict definition of property under constitutional law as habit and expectation and as a pattern of political compromise. Turning this wheel of cause and effect were moving feet, those of Charles Ball. Remember him? Charles Ball's the lassoed man. In fact, this particular episode today is called The Return of the Lassoed Man. That's Charles Ball. We've been following him for a while. And the Black Revolutionary in the Formation of America. So, turning the wheel of cause and effect were moving feet, those of Charles Ball, of the 32 other men to whom he was connected, of the 19 women roped together and behind them, and others still growing towards sellable height. From old Maryland and Virginia, think land, think indigenous, from old Maryland and Virginia, which were crumbling beneath the glossy veneers offered to the world by their politicians, the coffle chains and the people who touted them or toted them clanked across hundreds of miles into a new world where everything was flux and frolic. Forced migration and the expansion of slavery became a seemingly permanent and inevitable element of the mutually agreed to structure of lies defended by the agile legal realism of Marshall, that's John Marshall, the politician, and the myth of diffusion made the nation. To put the machine in motion, Washington could now rely on a set of chaining experts, Georgia men, who took the financial and physical and status risk of moving enslaved people. Charles Ball could not be moved more easily in every sense, with less political, ideological, legal, and personal friction. Thus, the coffle chained the early American Republic together. In South Carolina, Charles Ball's neck and hands were finally freed of the coffle's chains, but only so his owner could finish the chain's work of converting Charles and the other remaining Maryland slaves into market goods. Because they had left sweat from pores and pus from blisters on the road and had drawn down their meager stores of body fat, the Georgia man rested them for 20 days at a property owned by a cotton farmer. Ball and his companions were given butter to eat so that they would become sleek and fat. The lice were driven from their bodies and clothes by repeated washing. And soon white people began to come and examine them, ask them questions, speculate on their bodies. Here, the Georgia man was among people who respected him, calling him merchant instead of Negro driver, little n, or Georgia trader. Here, he was needed and not as the scapegoat for other enslavers' sins. He even let his name drop from his tight lips. "My name is McGriffith, sir," he said in response to a prospective buyer's inquiry. After 2 weeks, McGriffith moved and drove the drove of slaves south into Columbia. There on the 4th of July, the local jailer auctioned them off in front of a crowd of hundreds who had just finished eating a fine banquet and listening to a patriotic song and speech. The sale eventually narrowed down to the last three, the stoutest men, including Charles Ball. The jailer now theatrically announced that if McGriffith did not get $600 for each man, he would have to take them to Georgia and sell them there. An elderly gentleman announced that he would pay that amount for the carpenter. Now, Ball wasn't really a carpenter, but many lies were told on that day that celebrated freedom from tyranny. Not one of the slaves for sale had ever run away or stolen from their masters or been whipped. Each was sold by a fine Maryland or Virginia gentleman who had sadly fallen into debt. The other whites deferred to this elderly man. Ball pegged him as a major slave owner. He was actually one Wade Hampton, among other things, a major Yazoo investor. That was just the Yazoo was a scheme between corrupt politicians and land speculators. I talked about that a few episodes ago. But you could look up the Yazoo investment on your search engine, and you'll find out more information about it if you're unfamiliar with it. Having inherited rice plantation wealth in the Low Country, Hampton was in the process of shifting his slaves into cotton. For now, on acres he owned near Columbia, South Carolina. Later, his quest for wider vistas would lead him into Georgia, Mississippi, and Louisiana endeavors. Today, however, Hampton was drinking and celebrating the 4th of July. He told Charles to find a corner of a stable and go to sleep. The next day, they would make the trip to Hampton's nearby property, one last step of the journey that Charles Ball's feet had made from the old to the new. And you know what's so interesting about that, people? Notice how the enslavers, those white buyers of Black people, now they would celebrate the 4th of July. Okay, that was their patriotic holiday. And they did not even think or see a problem with purchasing people of African descent or the fact that they were on land that had been genocided. Millions of native people had been killed, but it was all right because red nations and Black nations were not white. They were not white and they were not Christian. So therefore, to the enslavers and the other whites that came over, that kind of belief system was taught to them, and they excelled in it. So I just wanted to point that out because for today, I'm finished reading What the Half Has Never Been Told, and I really want to get to my Black revolutionary friend who emerged during this same time. Now, this is a novel, Blake or the Huts of America. And I want you to know what Martin Delaney, who's the writer of this book, what he had to say about the enslavement of African people. Now, the protagonist, his name is Blake or Henry, and he is going from plantation to plantation, spreading the word of insurrection. So here we go. Now, he's now on the Crane plantation and he has come upon a group of women that he is interviewing. Okay. What time do you get to wash your clothes? None, sir. They only allow us one suit every New Year's Day, and us gals take it off every Saturday night after the men all gone to bed, and we wash it for Sunday. Why do you want clean clothes on Sunday if you have to work on that day? It's the Lord's day, and we want to be clean, and we feel better. How do the men do for clean clothes? We wash the men's clothes after they go to bed. And you say you were only allowed one suit a year now, young woman? I don't know your name, but Nancy, sir. Nancy's my name. Well, Nancy, speak plainly and don't be backward. What does your one suit consist of? A frock, sir, made out of coarse towel linen. If you some of you might remember, that's the same thing that Frederick Douglass said. Only one piece and no underclothes at all? That's all, sir, replied her, modestly looking down and drawing the basket, which sufficiently screened her still closer to her person. See, their clothes were all in tatters, so they would carry their basket of cotton to kind of cover where some of their skin would be showing. And I want to remind people this is the 19th century, the 1800s. Women dressed from the neck down to the ankles. So imagine what these slave girls, these enslaved girls went through. Only one piece and no underclothes at all? That's all, sir, replied she, modestly looking down and drawing the basket, which sufficiently screened her still closer to her person. Is that what you have on a sample of the goods your clothes are made of? Yes, sir. Just the kind. I would like to see some other of your girls. Stop, sir. I'll go call Susan. When gathering up and drawing around and before her a surplus of the back section, the only remaining sound remnant of the narrow, tattered garment that she wore, off she ran. Behind the gin, where lay in the sun a number of girls to rest themselves during their hour of spell. Susan, she exclaimed rather loudly, I don't want you girls, she pleasantly admonished as the whole 12 or 15 rose from their resting place and came hurriedly around the building, Nancy and Susan in the lead. They instinctively, as did Nancy, drew their garments around and about them. On coming in sight of the stranger, standing on the outside of the fence, Henry politely bowed as they approached. This is Susan, sir, said Nancy, introducing her friend with bland simplicity. How do you do, sir? Saluted she, a modest and intelligent, very pretty young black girl of good address. Well, Susan, replied Henry, I don't want anything but to see you girls, but I will ask you this question. How many suits of clothes do they give you a year? One, sir. How many pieces make a suit? Just one frock. And they simultaneously commenced drawing still closer before the remnant of coarse garment which hung in tatters about them. Don't you have shoes and stockings in winter? We no call for shoes, case tain't cold much. Only sometime little frost. How late in the evening do you work? The field hands, the work, wait a minute. The field hands, they pointing to those returning to the field, they work till bedtime. But we gals here, we worked in the gin. That's the cotton gin. Spell each other's, wait a minute, and spell each other every 12 hours. I told you I was having a problem reading this black dialect. You're at leisure now? Who fills your places? Another set of hands go to work for you come. How much cotton do they pick for a task? Each one must pick a big basketful and fetch it in from the field to the gin, else they get 30 lashes. 30 lashes. Mhm. How much must the women pick as a task? The same, sir, as the men. That can't be possible, said Henry, looking over the fence down upon the baskets. How much do they hold? I dismember, sir, but good deal. I see on each basket marked 225 pounds. Is that the quantity they hold? Yes, sir. That's it. All must be in gin certain hour else they get whipped. Sometimes the men help them. How can they do this when they have their own to carry? They put theirs on the head and catch hold one side the women basket. Sometimes they leave part in the field and go back out of it. Do you get plenty to eat? No, sir. They feeds us poorly sometimes. We don't have more than half. We don't have more than half enough. Did you girls ever work in the field? Oh, yes, sir. All of us. Only we wasn't strong enough to fetch in our cotton. Then they put us in the gin. Where would you rather be, in the gin or in the field? If I want, if it wasn't for carrying cotton, we'd rather work in the field. Why so, girls? Case then there wouldn't be so many old white planters come and look at us like we was a show. Who sees that the tasks are all done in the field? The driver. Is he a white man? No, sir. Black. Is he a free man? No, sir. Slave. Have you no white overseer? Yes, sir. Mr. Dorman. Where is Dorman when you are at work? He out in the field too. What is he doing there? He watched Jesse, the driver. Is Jesse pretty good fellow? No, sir. He treat black folks like dog. He all the time beat 'em when they no call to do it. How did he treat you girls when you worked in the field? He beat us. He beat us if we just get little behind the rest in picking. The white folks make him bad. Point him out to me, said Henry. And after tonight, he'll never whip another one. Now that's Henry. That's Henry, the revolutionary. He is spreading revolution from plantation to plantation, wherever he goes. Now, I know that you probably have, you know, heard different things about slavery and being in bondage and all that sort of thing. But I doubt if you've heard about an enslaved brother, a once enslaved brother like Henry. Now he's able to escape. He's carrying a bridle, a saddle, a horsewhip. And when any white folk bother him, he just says, well, I'm going looking for my master's horse that ran away. Smart. And he's going from plantation to plantation to give us the 411 about what really went on during Black enslavement in America. Now, get another one here. All right. I am now going to read from Frederick Douglass. I know a lot of you are following me with the narrative of Frederick Douglass, and I'm so pleased that you are. Now, Fred was an actual enslaved child growing into a man. And so he wrote this narrative in 1845, okay, when he was, of course, an adult by that time. But this book is very, very important because it gives you a firsthand view of what slavery was like. All right, I'm in chapter 6, the very bottom. I had resided but a short time in Baltimore before I observed a marked difference in the treatment of slaves from that which I had witnessed in the country. A city slave is almost a free man compared with a slave on the plantation. He is much better fed and clothed and enjoys privileges altogether unknown to the slave on the plantation. There is a vestige of decency, a sense of shame that does much to curb and check those outbreaks of atrocious cruelty to commonly enacted upon the plantation. He is a desperate slaveholder who will shock the humanity of his non-slaveholding neighbors with the cries of his lacerated slave. Few are willing to incur the odium attaching to the reputation of being a cruel master. And above all things, they would not be known as not giving a slave enough to eat. Every city slaveholder is anxious to have it known of him that he feeds his slaves well. And it is due to them to say that most of them do give their slaves enough to eat. There are, however, some painful exceptions to this rule. Directly opposite to us on Philpott Street lived Mr. Thomas Hamilton. He owned two slaves. Their names were Henrietta and Mary. Henrietta was about 22 years of age. Mary was about 14. And of all the mangled and emaciated creatures I ever looked upon, these two were the most so. His heart must be harder than stone that could look upon these unmoved. The head, neck, shoulders of Mary were literally cut to pieces. I have frequently felt her head and found it nearly covered with festering sores caused by the lash of her cruel mistress. I do not know that her master ever whipped her, but I have been an eyewitness to the cruelty of Mrs. Hamilton. I used to be in Mr. Hamilton's house nearly every day. Mrs. Hamilton used to sit in a large chair in the middle of the room with a heavy cowskin always by her side, and scarce an hour passed during the day but was marked by the blood of one of those slaves. The girls seldom passed her without her saying, "Move faster, you black gip," at the same time giving them a blow with the cowskin over the head or shoulders, often drawing blood. She would then say, "Take that, you black gip," continuing, "If you don't move faster, I'll move you." Added to the cruel lashings to which these slaves were subjected, they were kept nearly half starved. They seldom knew what it was to eat a full meal. I have seen Mary contending with the pigs for the offal thrown into the street. So much was Mary kicked and cut to pieces that she was oftener called pecked than by her name. I'm going to stop right there with Brother Fred. Now, I told you earlier when I started this session that I wanted you to think about Native American people, and I even named some of their ethnic groups, and also think about enslaved, when you hear enslaved Africans or enslaved people, to actually think about the groups that were on the continent before they came into the Americas or were brought into the Americas. And to that end, I want to show you a couple of other books. If you're interested in learning more about the Native Americans who were genocided in this country, I highly recommend this book, American Holocaust, Columbus and the Conquest of the New World by David Stannard. Now, he can go into much more detail than I certainly will in this series. That is, if you're interested in learning about the various cultures of the Red Nations before the American Holocaust came, that is, the Europeans came over to this country, saw that these people did not have advanced weapons that they did, and of course, the rest is history. Now, if you're also interested in learning about the various African groups, the Igbo, Hausa, Fulani, Mandingo in Africa, prior to their being brought to the America. This is a marvelous book, The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. So I just wanted to say to you that if in fact you want to go a little bit deeper into the Black ethnic groups that I mentioned, into the red ethnic groups that I mentioned, these are two books that I highly recommend. And I am doing this because very often when you are taught about American history, you'll hear about the white enslavers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and the whole bit. You'll hear this. You won't hear that the Native American people that George Washington slaughtered, they call him the man who burnt down town. This is what they call him. They don't salute him. All right. So we are living in a pragmatic a history in pieces, you see, because it was important to develop a mythology around the Europeans' entry. That's the Spanish, that's the French, and that's the English, that's the Germans, that's the Dutch who came over to America. Now, they made America what it is today. Yes, they did. But it is imperative that you know in total how it was done. America could not have existed without the free labor of the African people for centuries. America, as we know it, because it could have went another way, but it didn't. America could not have existed with that we know today without the genocide of the millions of red nations. So I just want you all, my listeners, bless your hearts, to have a fuller understanding of what it meant to be in America, or what it means to be in America. And one more thing I'm going to say before I leave you all today. The African American is really a new people. Yes, the Mexican American, they knew too, because they're a combination of peoples. Okay, the Native American very often is a combination of peoples. You see, like African American certainly didn't. That term didn't even exist years and years ago because we had not been created. You understand? And you know about the mass rape of Black women because I've read that to you before. Well, it was a mass rape of Native American women too. Okay. So these groups are relatively new. Well, brothers and sisters, as always, it is beautiful to have been with you today. I'm so happy that you're hanging in there with me. And I look forward to seeing you this coming Thursday, same time, same place. So this is Readings with Regina. I'm about to click off. And wait a minute, I think I got a comment here. Let me show it. Is that? Blessings, Michael. Thank you, Michael Celeste, hanging in there with me. Love it. Love it. Okay. So I'm going to end now. And I look forward to seeing you again on Thursday. You take really good care and know that I pray for you every morning and every evening.